Welcome to the Business Vitality Podcast. My name is Catherine Cantey. I am the host and an executive coach. I work with teams, individuals, and leaders to help create measured leadership change. We do that using practical applications, and our clients are creating 100% measured results as seen by those around them. Not necessarily what I think or what they think, but what the other people are seeing. And they are being recognized for the hard work that they're doing. If you're interested in learning more about some of the work that we're doing, you can learn more at catherinecantey.com. I would love for you to subscribe to this show, to Business Vitality. This is my way to continue to pay it forward and share business best practices. Stay tuned and listen to the interview. Thanks for being here. Dora Boussias, you are the Senior Director for Data Strategy and Architecture. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Catherine. It's so much fun to be here with you today. Thank you for having me.
Well, I have enjoyed chatting. We had some conversations before this, and I just want to continue the discussion and the conversation. And before we get into some leadership type questions and how businesses are remaining relevant and vital day after day, I would love for you to talk about your title, Senior Director for Data Strategy and Architecture. Not everybody understands what that means. I know that there are incredibly talented people in the IT department that just make things work. And I love it when it works. So do you mind just kind of talking about it for those that may not be familiar with, what that title represents?
Absolutely. So my role is focusing very much on data. Obviously, some of the technology around data comes into place as well. Personally, I have rounding it up about 30 years in IT. Although I typically say I'm a business leader first and foremost. I always think drive with a business mindset. How can I help my business go forward? And how do I do that through the lens of better managing and really just leveraging the potential power in data? Because data by itself really, it's just the bits and the bytes. So how do we understand that within business context so it can really inform or drive better decisions? And how can we also bring best practices from the data management and analytics world to just have more streamlined operations and be able to monetize this asset? So data strategy and architecture is really looking at the enterprise level. And currently I work in healthcare. I do work with Stryker. It's a large healthcare organization. So how do we look across, and that's what this role is at the global level, across the regions, the functions, the divisions, to understand how do we drive synergies, how do we speak the same language, how do we bring again those best practices and really harness that power that data has. And it's there for us. I think of data as the lifeblood of organizations. So there's a lot of focus that we need to give to it to take advantage of it. And that's kind of like what the focus of my role is.
I love that. And on LinkedIn, I saw that one of your skill sets of many, many, many that you have, you said you are used to walking the line between business and IT. And I think that is such a gift to be able to have the knowledge and the insights of the data and to be able to walk that line. It probably isn't always easy. Do you know when you first kind of realized I am walking this line between the business and IT? What was that like?
I am so fortunate, I think, to have realized early on, even though I started on the technology side, really, I started doing COBOL mainframe programming. And I've played pretty much every role that you can think of in IT: software development, data development, project program management, architecture. For the past 18 to 20 years, I've been doing enterprise architecture and data, which means it's got that enterprise visibility and accountability across. But early on, from the 90s, early on in my career, I realized that, hey, as I'm working on this, I remember we were creating, for example, financial reports coming out of the mainframe. And I recall it was a big thing. We were writing all these COBOL programs and financial reports were coming out and they were to be delivered on time to the CFO of the organization on the third floor of this retailer's headquarters, right? So it was those events that day when I realized, this data, these reports we're creating, yes, we're using the technology, but somebody's looking at that data on that piece of paper back then, and it informs, it drives the decisions. So I realized that it's not just the technology and the data, it's so closely related to the business. And I figured, okay, that's the purpose why we're doing it. We're not going to do data or technology for the sake of data, for the sake of technology. So it's really been inherent to me throughout all of the roles that I've played, to always connect it to how is this helping my business? What are we trying to do? What are our objectives? And so all of my roles, like I said, it's been close to 20 years that my roles have enterprise visibility and or accountability, which means that I speak a lot to the business and I speak a lot to the technology. And having kind of grown through the ranks, if you will, in IT, I can speak very much technical language, technical speak with people that are in the weeds, but I can also need to be able, especially in a senior director role, need to be able to explain to executives what it is that we're trying to do here. How is this helping us? And that does take, I sometimes say, both left brain, right brain, a leg in IT, a leg for the business. It's not easy, but I mean, I think it comes a little bit more natural to me, maybe not as natural to other people, but it's not only that. I've spent immense effort and time to really get better at communicating it, especially in business terms. So yes, it comes a little natural, but it took a lot of work as well. So it can get easier over time with some intentional effort behind it.
I love that. Intentional effort behind communication, bridging business and data and technology. And as you were talking, I had a flashback of one of my first jobs working for a bank. They hired me to go do business development. Before I could even go talk to anybody, they put me in the operations center. And I had an office out there for 18 months. I'm like, when are we going to go see customers? They're like, you got to figure out what we can sell first. And I was like, oh. So I sat with every manager in that bank operations center. It was a gift to be able to sit there and listen to what the pain points were of the folks that were running the data, that were stuffing the statements, that had all the technology. It was a gift to be able to listen to their research and for them to be able to say, if we can tweak this piece of work that we're doing, it's going to make this whole team's life easier. And to have those relationships and communication, it was so important. Like, it just created this waterfall of positivity for the next 12 years of me being there, because we had the communication. It was very intentional from the beginning. What are we comfortable with selling? What are we comfortable with doing in the back room? Help me understand. And from there, I could speak to customers so much easier because I knew that these incredible people had my back. And then as we grew, we could grow much more effectively because we were this team that were working together alongside. So I think it's so exciting to be able to hear you talk about that intentionality and the communication that exists.
Absolutely, Catherine, you hit on so many things that are so top of mind for me as well. And, I want to connect it a little bit with where we are right now, because you said you were sitting there, you were making an effort to speak to these people, understand what they're doing. So part of communication, it's also, I'm going to bring along with communication, also curiosity. For me, I also put intentional effort behind an authentic curiosity too, really asking questions and caring to understand my customers, my stakeholders, which could be external and internal, especially internal too, because I'm trying to understand what it is like for them in their day-to-day operations. What are they doing? What is it that it's their pain points? And I use that then to say and be better communicating, okay, and these things that we're trying to do with data and technology, this is how it's going to help. But I cannot do a good job communicating that unless I understand where they're coming from. Now, you said in person, physically, you were there. And one of the things that I like doing in life, especially in this hybrid or remote world that we have, make use of the technology. Before even COVID started, I was one of those people that sometimes I would put people on the spot in a nice way, just really turn on the camera. Let's leverage it, because we leverage the technology to just get a little bit more of that connection, really look at the other person, even the body language, we can hear and learn things about what they're saying, what they're doing. So I'm excited to hear everything that you said as well, because it just really resonates with me. I think these are tools that are just helping us, no matter what the role, really. Caring about what the other people are doing, using that to communicate and help drive our agenda as well by connecting it to what they're doing. Trying to, I sometimes say, use as many senses as you can, you know, the audio, the video, you know, feel it, see it, touch it. The more senses you bring into a conversation, I think the better it resonates, it sticks, it gets understood, and it informs and enhances the conversations to the point as well. So we get to what really matters. And as a team, we make the right decisions going forward.
I love that. You just said a word, curiosity. And sometimes curiosity isn't always in these big corporate cultures that are extremely effective today. You know, they're making tons and tons of money and doing good business. And sometimes that curiosity is missing, and it creates an impact that's not really intentional. And I'm wondering, I was speaking with a general counsel yesterday of a very large organization, and we're talking about building relationships with internal clients. How do you serve the other internal clients within the organization? And for me, I think it's curiosity. Are you curious about what these other folks are doing? Or are you just trying to push the agenda and get through the meeting and like turn this thing over as fast as possible? And I've been guilty of doing both, you know, taking the time, and then also like, we just got to get it done. Like, let's just sit down and knock it out. So I think there's an incredible opportunity to somehow create some curiosity in there to really understand what's going on and why we're doing it. Do you have maybe one or two tips how do you open up the door for curiosity? Because once you hit a certain level in an organization, sometimes they just expect answers, and nobody's slowing down to really get curious about where could this take us. And I think that also aligns with your position, being in strategic thought partner within this work that you're doing.
What a great question. What a great aspect to think about, right? I think for me, what has helped most is really think about the other person, what will help them, because then the questions that we ask, the things that we say are different as well. So when the other person understands that you're trying to help them, you're really trying to understand where they're coming from, what their pain point is, right? And you're really listening. So again, the other, look at it, think of it, communicate about it from the other person's perspective, but then also listen, ask questions, but also listen and try to understand what they're saying. And in some cases, almost even read between the lines, pay attention to the words that they're saying. And that can bring up another curious question. What did you mean about this? And you said something else too, Catherine, that I love. You know, you said sometimes, you know, in big corporate environments, we're trying to be a little bit too sophisticated, too elegant with our words. And what I found is that just very simply, you know, what does this mean? What do we mean here? How is this going to help us? What is it going to progress forward? But in simple words, sometimes we get, I think, too bogged down in big terms, big words. And I've also found that sometimes people are just hesitant to say, to raise their hand and say, I don't understand, what does this mean? And people assume that everybody understands what we're talking about sometimes. So, you know, something else about questions. And I think that opens up also to your question is, and something that I've learned over the years. So if I were to go 20 years back, what I would say to myself is, don't be afraid to ask questions. I used to make this assumption that I didn't know as much as the other people knew. I was new to the organization, new to the team, and I wouldn't ask the question. What I've learned over the years is that, well, that's not always the case. And many times people make assumptions, and what ends up happening is that we don't have real clarity as to, you know, what does this really mean? And what is it that we really need to do here? And have also being specific, excuse me, of who's gonna do what when, you know, some of those basics. So what I've learned over the years is to not be shy. Sometimes I pretend and ask what someone might think they're really silly, self-explanatory questions, but they're not. Pretty much every time I ask that question, turns out the conversation starts because other folks we're making assumptions and we're not understanding it the same way either. So I know I went kind of like into another thing, but I think these are all very relevant, and they help with those very real, authentic, conversations, caring about understanding what it is that we're trying to solve for, or create a new, something new, innovate, and help our organizations go forward.
That's fantastic. And I love that you mentioned something about listening between the lines.
Mm-hmm.
And I was speaking with someone not too long ago, and they said, I like the fact that you said you can read what's being said or what's not being said, but I feel like it's just something that's just been taking place over the years, and you just kind of build that muscle of, just like you said earlier, you turn the camera on, you look at the body language, you see the facial expressions. Right. There's so much communication that we could be losing, that we could really accelerate growth, or accelerate that report, or accelerate the communication if we turn cameras back on, or if we met in person. And I would love, because I can tell with you know how to read between the lines. How does somebody even get started with realizing that maybe we need to read between the lines, and maybe they write one email, but we're missing some stuff in there. So I just feel like there's some acceleration in there. Are there maybe a few things that come to mind when that reading between the lines, you may just do it so naturally now you don't even realize it? But I would love for you just to talk about it, because I was talking with these executives and they're like, there's not a whole lot of people that do that. So do you mind sharing that?
Yeah, I do. And I want to say it's always intentional, right? I mean, and part of it is just being in the moment, not being distracted, not multitasking on too many things, or even on any things, right? Really listening, being in the moment. But I think I think when somebody pays attention, it doesn't take much to realize if there's a response from the other stakeholder, from the other party, right? When you see there's no follow-up, when you don't get any questions back yourself, when the conversation is not happening, or when you leave the meeting, even if there's some follow-ups identifying, and then crickets, nothing is happening, then you know that, okay, we haven't really even built that credibility and that trust and that team spirit for us. Yes, we have a common goal. It could be that we don't have a common goal, and that's very important too, right, in terms of progress and accelerating progress, like you said, because we have to be working together as a team with a common purpose. So if that response is not there, okay, that something is off. Maybe the other person or ourselves didn't understand each other. We don't have common purpose and common goals. So what do we need to do about that? Again, I would simplify it. I would maybe, monitor it. Maybe sometimes, have a one-on-one conversation and say, hey, how can we do better here? This is what's happening. It feels like it's a slow pace. Is there something that we can do together? How can I help? And I usually go, I usually follow the path of trying to help the other stakeholder, because that really turns back and helps me as well. So it's not me trying to push my agenda. It's me really caring, trying to understand what is the pain point, or what is it that's something that I can do to help the other person, the other team. Doing that, owning it, showing that, yes, I am here to help. And what I found out again and again is that builds the credibility, it builds the trust. Next time I go to work with this stakeholder group, I don't have to do as much hard work. Like, they believe me, I've gained credibility. So if I say something, and I've proven to, right, over the times that I own things, I do good work, I follow up, I follow through, I put in the effort, the hard work, right? I'm not just checking off things. Then there is a little bit less of a conversation. Should we really do that or not? Because we've built that credibility. But it starts with, how can I help the other person? Really doing that. And then over time, it gets easier. And it gets easier to also get that response and work together. It builds on that trust.
You're authentic as well. And that's just, you can tell that's who you are. You're very authentic and intentional. And I can see why you're, a great success, because you offer that and you bring that.
Thank you. I want to say something about that. These are impactful concepts, impactful words. We're talking about authenticity, for example, and we're talking about resilience, and we're talking about communication. Sometimes too, we take these things for granted. So I want to be really clear here. When we're saying be authentic, I don't mean pretend to be authentic. I mean, be authentically authentic. And, that is not an easy thing for everyone, because it may not come, natural, or it takes work. Maybe that's not an easy thing, because you really need to care for the other side, and you really need to listen. And resiliency, when something doesn't work, you really need to be consistent and try to make it work until you get over the hump, if you will, and then you hit some critical mass, and then things happen a lot faster. I've said in the past, to be authentically authentic, because if we say one thing but we do a different thing, if the actions don't match the words, or if it's just a mechanical thing where we're just checking off boxes and we don't really mean it, it comes through. So that too is not going to help in building the rapport, the trust, the credibility that itself helps with having a better collaborative relationship with our stakeholders and really making great things happen. Because to me, that's fundamental. That culture, the how we work together, the how we communicate with each other, the really being in it, present and working towards those common goals, before all the technical skills, before anything else. Right? Technical, operational, whatever it is, that to me, how we work with each other, how we treat each other, the culture part of it, the people and human aspects of organizations, in my experience, is most critical than anything else.
Very well said. And these aren't necessarily, it's not the data that's driving this. This is the human connection that you're bringing to the table that's allowing you to exceed with the work that you're doing, because you bring the human aspect to the table first, and then you begin to help other people, and then you begin to open up and be able to have that communication, that curiosity, the intentionalness about the whole thing. I think it's like what you said. It's in my words, it's practical, but everybody's not doing this stuff, and I guess it's hard to be able to show up and continue to lead that way.
It is. And I do want to be clear about something. This doesn't mean that whatever role we play, right? So myself in data strategy and architecture, sure, I can look at what's the needs. I can put together the strategy, working with the business strategy, data strategy, right? Multi-year roadmap we execute. What I'm trying to say is that, yes, I go forward with that human and culture and people aspect of it, but that's on top of whatever our role, knowing our stuff. I always say, know your domain. You got to be good at that. I think the difference is that sometimes people forget, and they think that I'm really good at something, let's say a technical skill. If I'm really good at that, that's what's going to differentiate me. And in my experience over my career, what I found out, and that is something that I learned over the years that I did not know. So if I were to go back 20 years, that's something else I would tell myself, pay attention to this, learn more about the business, and learn to communicate and work with people. It's a given, it's table stakes that you need to know your domain. And because if it's only the interpersonal, but you're not delivering, that's not going to cut it either, right? You need to know your stuff, you need to deliver, you need to know how to execute, be good at this. But what's going to differentiate and make a difference and help be more successful in what we do, I think, is that intentional effort into how do I respectfully better work with people, respect what they have to bring to the table, try to help genuinely, listen, make sure that there's clarity into what we do, how we're going to get there as a team, egos aside. Those are the kinds of things that I'm a strong believer that they make a whole lot of difference.
I think that's well said, because you're right. You can have that skill set of being able to connect and communicate, but if you don't know your wheelhouse and you don't know what your what you're providing, it's just going to fall, and vice versa. You can't have one without the other. And I think
Exactly.
when you bridge that stuff together, and a lot of this stuff is all about collaborating, but it's collaborating your skill sets, not just collaborating with partners within the organization. So I think that's extremely helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. One of the things that I say to my team and other folks as well is that, there's the technical aspects of this. There is the communication. Like if I'm looking at a development plan for myself, for example, or anyone that I talk to, really know your craft, technical, whatever it is, right? The technical aspects of your role. But then do pay attention to communication. I heard someone say many years ago, what good is it? They were actually talking about somebody else, and let's start with me. They said, XYZ person does a great job. But no, nobody knows about it. So if nobody knows about it, if you don't communicate, or if you don't know how to communicate about it, it takes away from the value that this could bring. So really know your technical stuff, but communicate about it, and then know the functional business side of things as well, because that will also help communicate in a way that the other folks understand it, get it, respond to it, and everything that we spoke about turns out to be better, more effective.
Dora, you are a plethora of knowledge. If someone, I could keep going on, but I want to be considerate of time. If someone wants to just keep learning about you and just keep listening to what you have some great resources that you're sharing information on LinkedIn. Do you mind, somebody wants to just kind of learn more about you and some of the stuff that you're doing, what's the best way to connect?
LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me, and I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. I try to give back to the community, so I'd love to. Actually, I'm always open. I always believe in learning from each other. So yes, LinkedIn is where you can find me, and I encourage folks to reach out and connect.
Thank you so much. Dora Boussias, you are the Senior Director for Data and Strategy and Architecture. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Catherine. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and have this chat with you today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the episode. If you like it, please subscribe, share this episode or this show with other people around you. The greatest form of a compliment is a referral. I really appreciate them. And if you think that you want to learn more about some of the work we're doing, I encourage you to reach out to catherinecantey.com. You can schedule a call or just continue to read articles and information that we post out there. Thank you so much for being here.